I was talking of willing suspension of disbelief. Now, I was talking of willing suspension of disbelief, and this is a very commonly used, very popular term that was actually coined by Coleridge, that is willing suspension of disbelief. Now, what actually is the thing? When I see something on stage, actually what happens, I am very much aware of the fact that these things are not true. They have been created. But Coleridge says that to enjoy the beauty, to enjoy that particular work of art, I have to, or a reader needs to suspend willingly his sense of disbelief to enjoy that work as something true, though ultimately he or she is aware that this is not something true. Now, this particular crisis was very much there with the writers of the neoclassical age, who, following Aristotle and later Sidney and all, they believed that a true drama or a true play should follow the unities of time, place and action. Why? To make the literary work, to make the drama or the play more credible. And for attaining the sense of credibility, they always wanted to rigorously follow the three unities of time, place and action. But Coleridge said, and as Coleridge has discussed that in his preface to Lyrical Ballads, that I and Wordsworth plan to write something where I will be dealing with the things supernatural, and where I will be dealing with the supernatural things in such a way that for a time being, momentarily, it will seem something very much real to the readers, to the viewers. That was the thing. Now, all through the neoclassic era, the question of dramatic illusion and credibility has exercised the mind of the critics. The neoclassicals were always in a crisis regarding making their works more credible to the audience or to the readers, and for that they always wanted to maintain the unities of time, unities of place and unity of action. And this we find in the writings of Dryden and Dr. Johnson even, who had made more strong comments on this in comparison to their contemporaries. However, it was Coleridge who made an end to this age-old debate and put the debate at rest, that a writer, a creative writer, a creative artist should not be worried about the following of the unity of action, time and place, but he substituted that with the very term, the willing suspension of disbelief, that the writer need not follow the unities of time, place and action, because there is something that is the willing suspension of disbelief, where the reader or the viewer or the audience will for the time being for the time being stop thinking that these things are not real. They will stop disbelieving this, and they will take this as something real, only to enjoy the work of art, only to enjoy the thing, though ultimately they are aware of the fact that these things are not real. Now, Coleridge uses the phrase in connection with his account in chapter 14. I'm going back to chapter 14 of the Biographia Literaria, and later he also discussed this in chapter 23 of Biographia Literaria also. And there he comments on the origin and genesis of the Lyrical Ballads, where Coleridge writes in this idea in chapter 14 of Biographia Literaria. He speaks of their plan of writing the Lyrical Ballads, and he says that in this idea originated the plan of the Lyrical Ballads, in which it was agreed. So I'm quoting Coleridge's line. It was agreed that my endeavors should be directed to persons and characters supernatural, in which it was agreed that my endeavors should be directed to persons and characters supernatural, or at least romantic, yet so as to transfer from our inward nature a human interest and a semblance of truth sufficient to procure for the shadows of imagination that willing suspension of disbelief for the moment which constitutes poetic faith. I repeat the word, I repeat the line. Coleridge writes, in this idea originated the plan of the lyrical ballads, in which it was agreed that my endeavors should be directed to persons and characters supernatural, or at least romantic, yet so as to transfer from our inward nature, I repeat, yet so as to transfer from our inward nature a human interest and a semblance of truth sufficient to procure for the shadows of imagination. I repeat, sufficient to procure for the shadows of imagination that willing suspension of disbelief for the moment which constitutes poetic faith. So he says that we plan that I will be dealing with the things supernatural or at least romantic. Why? Why should I take up the supernatural and romantic things? Why? So as to transfer, I will transfer what? From our inward human nature. So we always have the feeling or tendency to see what is credible, what is real, or if I find that something which I am seeing is not real, I always try to logically accept it as real, or I want to see it as real. So he says, so as to transfer from our inward nature a human interest and a semblance of truth. We are always in search of a semblance of truth, something which will be true, so sufficient to procure the shadows of imagination. So he says that I will be dealing with the supernatural things or the romantic things in such a way that the shadows will look something true, the shadows will look something real momentarily. This shadow will look, which is shadow will appear to the readers something as true and real for the time being. Okay, shadows of imagination. How? With the willing suspension of disbelief. He says that the audience or the readers will willingly suspend their sense of disbelief only to accept the things as real for the time being, though they are aware of the fact that these things are not real. For the moment, so this is very important, willing suspension of disbelief for the moment. Now this actually constitutes the poetic faith. Now this is how he wants to treat, he was to treat of characters supernatural, which apparently appear, which generally appear incredible and improbable, because supernatural things are incredible and improbable, we all know that. But still, when we watch a horror movie, when we watch something supernatural, we feel what? We feel a sort of terror. We are afraid of the things. We want to realize, we want to feel that they are there in front of us. So when you will be, some of you who listen to Sunday Suspense, they give a sort of disclaimer that we actually show this not to promote or not to promote the things that black magic and any kind of superstition, but these things are only to give you pleasure for the time being. The Bengali is ভূতের গল্প শুনতে সবাই ভালোবাসে কেন না ভয় লাগে. So we are afraid of the things, we become frightened. This frightening effect gives us pleasure. আমরা ভয় পাই, and that's why we love it. Okay, So when I am afraid or when I get frightened, that means momentarily I am suspending my sense of disbelief, because my logical sense says that these things cannot appear. Rakhosh, Rakhoshi, Bhoot, Petni, all these are not there. The ghosts and zombies, they do not, they actually, they do not exist. But when we see them in front of us, or when we read them, when we read Dracula stories, we feel a sort of shiver. We shiver in fear, we are afraid, we are frightened, and we love to get frightened, because temporarily, momentarily, we suspend our sense of disbelief to believe this, that, this, the believe the things that we are reading or seeing or viewing or watching, whatever it is, they are real. So that is the thing which is known as the willing suspension of disbelief. And we would believe for the moment in what is essentially incredible and improbable. What is essentially actually incredible or improbable, we believe that to be true momentarily. In other words, the treatment should be such as would send the judgment of readers to sleep. The readers will just set aside their sense of judgment. They will just do what? Will set aside their sense of judgment and will momentarily enjoy that work of art. So this is willing suspension of disbelief. And willing suspension of disbelief, you read it very cautiously, very meticulously, because this thing may be, I'm not giving suggestions, but may be an important thing for your short questions. I don't know when you will have your exam this time. But here we end Coleridge's Biographia Literaria portion that we have in our syllabus, and in the next class we will start Shelley's Defense of Poetry, which has many things common with Sidney's Apology for Poetry. Till then, have a nice time, enjoy your staying at home, don't go out, things are getting worse. Take care of your health, have plenty of hot water, and wash your hands with sanitizer and hand wash and whatever it is. And another thing is, if you have any question, just give me a call after this live session. Thank you. I'll let you know when we will have our next class. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being with me.